So I spend most of my time writing books, writing those little pamphlets that you see at national parks. Do stuff for PBS and History Channel, fire cannons, empty trash cans. Pretty much do everything. What I thought we'd do is give you a little perspective on the War of the Chesapeake, because right now we're in the middle of the American bicentennial of the War of 1812, and that's 1813 here in the Chesapeake Bay. This is known as the middle ground of the War of 1812. 3 campaign areas: Canada, the frontier, Chesapeake Bay, and then the end will be the Gulf War. But there are more sites here in the Chesapeake Bay than all the War of 1812 sites in the world put together. There are over 1,000 sites so far we have found and located here. This includes battlefields, sunken British ships, 35 American gunboats sunk in the channel here, 3 1812 forts we found on private lands here on the eastern shore. Starbucks is right there. No more sites here on the Chesapeake Bay. We've been to every one of them. We got all the documents on it, photographed it, archaeology it to death, and so you'll be hearing a lot more about these sites within the next few months as more books are being written, more documentaries are being done. Well, the War of 1812. It's our forgotten war, much like the Korean War. We don't know too much about it. Why was it fought in the first place? Well, England and France that have been at war with each other for almost 20 years now. We're a little maritime country. We're caught in a conflict, of this global conflict between England and France. England has put an embargo against us. France has put an embargo against us. President James Madison, Washington, is putting an embargo on ourselves to keep us from trading with Europe, to keep us out of this global conflict. We don't want no more of this war in Europe, but we're going to be drawn into it. And we're going to call it the War of 1812, because on June 18th, my birthday, 1812, we declare war on the most powerful nation in the world, in the Western Hemisphere, Great Britain. Mostly because of free trade and sailors' rights. In 1793, France declares war on England, and this is the beginning of the Napoleonic Wars. That will last for 20 years, and we're caught right smack dab in the middle of it. England has taken our ships off the high seas. They're interrupted with our free trade. They're impressing our American sailors. Sailors' rights are at issue here. Tens of thousands of American merchant seamen, and in some cases U.S. Navy personnel, are being taken off of our ships and impressed into the Royal Navy. There's trouble over here in the Northwest. England was supposed to vacate it at the signing of the Treaty of Paris in 1783 that ended the American Revolution, but the English are still there. The newly elected representatives of Kentucky, Indiana, applying for westward expansion, the Warhawks. There's a lot of money to be made here in these western lands. In June of 1812, we decided to invade Canada. Now we can't attack England because it's way over there. Logistical problem there. But what we can do is attack Canada. It's just up the road. So the cry in Baltimore, along the eastern seaboard, is this. Mrs. Taylor, my 5th grade teacher, taught me this. There was a woman for you. She used to dress up in her great-grandfather's Revolutionary War coat. She had the hat, the coat, the sword, and she would, this is 5th grade, she'd stand up with her desk. Man, gosh. I was getting excited. Just look at her. I still remember her after all these years, 50 years ago. One day I'll find someone. Anyway, here's what everybody was saying. Onward to Canada! Well, that was a bad idea. The American Army is unprepared. Treasury is nearly depleted. New York, Connecticut, they refuse to send their citizens into Canada. There's no federal law that says they have to go. These are states' rights here. They refuse to send troops into Canada. So Washington pulls together these campaigns, 3 of them, and all 3 of them fail. Disastrous defeats for the American Army. What England decides to do is cause a diversion. She wants to get these Americans off the Canadian frontier. And so in the spring of 1813, British warships come into the Chesapeake Bay and seal off the bay, seal off the Delaware Bay. So for 1813, British warships, 184 of them altogether, will sail up and down the Chesapeake Bay, burning Havre de Grace, Fredericktown, Battle of Queenstown, 2 battles of St. Michael's, Benedict, 100 sites along the Potomac River they raid and plunder, taking tobacco. On any given day, you can cannon fire, echoing up and down the Chesapeake Bay. You could see smoke up and down the Chesapeake Bay as the British raid up and down the bay. There's nothing we can do about it. So in 1814, the British launched the last major campaign here in the Chesapeake Bay. In August of 1814, 50 British warships sail into the Chesapeake Bay. They sail up to the Patuxent River, sail 50 miles up this river, beautiful river. And they land at Benedict, Maryland. Still a tidewater town. It has not changed in 200 years. The campgrounds are still there, for 5,000 British troops in camp. We found some of the original roads that the British marched along on their way to Washington. So in August of 1814, 5,000 British soldiers march 50 miles towards Bladensburg, Maryland. They defeat the American army twice their size, enter the nation's capital, and burn it. The fire is so intense from the President's palace, the Treasury, burning, that the soldiers here, on top of these walls, could see the glow of Washington burning on the horizon. People on the rooftops of their homes in downtown Baltimore can also see this fiery glow as the nation's capital is in flames. The next morning, the British leave Washington and they march 50 miles back to their ships. They will lose 1,000 men along the way because of the heat. They get back on their ships, sail down the Patuxent, down here to Angier Island, Virginia, where a British naval base is located. And they collect their forces, and now they're going to make one more push. Washington had been so overwhelmingly successful they decide to make a dash on Baltimore. Baltimore is the most important city in the Union. It's the third largest city, 50,000 population, 10,000 free blacks. Baltimore has the largest free African-American population in the country. It has more African-Americans free in the entire state of Maryland. The British are coming to Baltimore to destroy those shipyards, tobacco warehouses. Washington, we have to remember, in 1814 is nothing but a disease. These are the words of the Secretary of War. But a disease in Britain swampland where much vermin and politicians are found. My God, what would they want to do here? And that's why Washington was left defensive. 2 weeks before the British attacked Washington, someone asked the Secretary of War about this, and he said, nobody's going to come to Washington. My God, what's there? And it's true, it was only swamps, a few government buildings. Baltimore, however, is different. So Baltimore's been preparing itself for over a year before the British actually arrived here. So on the morning of September the 12th, 1814, British warships, 50 of them, sail up the bay, past Annapolis, causing the panic in the capital there, and they enter the Patapsco River, which is the river right out here in front of us. And thus begins a 3-day campaign we know as the Baltimore Campaign, and it will last for 3 days. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a little walk up to the we're going to take a walk up there. We're going to push the Americans now all the way back to the city of Baltimore, 2 miles behind us, where the main defenses of the city are taking place. 20,000 Delawareans, Pennsylvanians, Virginians, Marylanders, U.S. Marines, U.S. Cavalry, U.S. Infantry are gathering in Baltimore. Another 10,000 are waiting on the outskirts of Baltimore, ready to come in. Some of these are marching 400 miles to get here. The British march, they get within 2 miles of the city of Baltimore, and they wait. Because the next morning, September the 13th, British warships anchored 2 miles out, half the distance to that bridge, and commenced a 25-hour naval bombardment. The concept here is to destroy these big water gun batteries here, slip past the fort, and get it close enough to the city where the Royal Navy would open up with their armament, bombs and rockets on the American defenses, and the British Army would make a rare midnight assault. 5,000 British troops against 20,000 Americans on a high hill with 42 pieces of artillery. During the entire battle, there were severe thunderstorms, lightning flashing across the sky, the rain pouring down. There are accounts of the ground shaking from the concussion of the artillery for nearly 25 straight hours. It was awful. I wasn't here, but that park ranger up in the fort there somewhere was. September 13th, British warships anchored and they commenced the bombardment of the fort. They could hear the bombardment in downtown Philadelphia, 100 miles away to the northeast. Described as distant thunder. What the British are using against Fort McHenry is the most powerful weapon known to man. It's a 200-pound cast iron exploding shell that was launched from the bomb ships out here. It would go 1 mile up into the sky and then begin its downward plunge. And if the fuse was set just right, it should explode. Hot metal fragments down on the 1,000 defenders here, causing 4 deaths, 24 wounded. So for 25 straight hours, 1,800 of these 200-pound bombs, some of which are still out here, rained down upon the fort. What the Americans are using are these guns. That first gun here is an original gun. And that's the biggest gun of the Napoleonic period. A naval gun. That's 10,000 pounds. It takes 21 men to operate it. The French government loaned 30 of these here to Fort McHenry in 1812. And so we recreated a 100-foot section of the 400-foot long upper gun battery. Every seacoast fort had water batteries from the days of the American Revolution all the way up through the Civil War. And what they're doing here is something rather unique. This has a range of 1.5 miles. That's 10,000 pounds right there, just the tube alone. You operate this just like on board a Navy ship. That's all this is a gun deck, except it's on land. You put a 12-pound charge in there, and then on top of that gunpowder, you put a big chunk of sod, which they had cut from the farmers' fields, and put that big chunk of sod clay, ran that down on the gunpowder bag. Because the next thing you're going to do is take one of these 36-pound solid iron balls, put it back here in a hot shot furnace, a brick oven. And if you didn't have a hot shot furnace, you wouldn't really afford it all. In 20 minutes, that ball will come out cherry red. It is so hot. They bring it up to the cannon pretty fast. And the tool they use is like 2 spoons come together, and when that ball comes out of the oven, it plops down into these spoons, and these 2 guys carry it up and plop it into the muzzle there, and they take that rammer and ram that shot down on top of the cannon, and then they take this running tackle, these lines here, and these 21 men move the cannon all the way up against the wall. When this cannon goes off, it will jump off the deck 2 inches. It will jump back 5 feet. The velocity of that ball when it leaves the muzzle, and some muzzles are bigger than others. That ball is traveling at 1,800 feet per second. The concept here is this. When that ball leaves, you want it to hit the water just this side of that green buoy. You don't want to aim you're not aiming the cannon at the ships out there, you're aiming the cannon at the water. So when that ball comes down, it's going to hit that water surface at just the right angle and start skimming across the water surface like a surface torpedo, like a stone across a pond. And as it's skimming the water surface, air is moving across it. It's getting hotter and hotter and hotter as that ball is just moving towards that British ship right at the water line. Hit the ship right at the water line, punches through 2 feet about. And then it comes inboard and decimates the inner hull, where inside the British ship are the gun crews. That ball comes through and breaks apart the inner hull, and big chards of wood comes in and decimates the gun crews here on board the ships. Water starts rushing in. A hot cannonball is loose in the ship. So the ship's carpenter, the ship's surgeon, the gun captain has a lot of problems to deal with because of these hot cannonballs coming right through the ship at water level. But after 25 hours, the British are unsuccessful in taking the fort, and on the morning of September the 14th, 1814, the Vice Admiral gives the order to withdraw. The British Army turns around with that other attack in Baltimore. The British fleet turn around and sail away, and this is what happens on September the 14th, 1814, at dawn's early light. Make sure you get my right side. At 9 a.m., September 14th, after 25 hours of fierce bombardment, the British hoist their sails and sail away. The storm abates, and at 9 a.m., sharp, the flag is raised over the fort. The original of that one is taken down, which had been thrown throughout the night. Every fort had 2 flags, a small flag for inclement weather and a garrison flag. This flag was taken down. What happened to it was simply discarded. But at 9 o'clock, the big flag, the garrison flag we see today at the Smithsonian in Washington, was raised up over the fort. Now, let me make this perfectly clear. The flag was raised at 9 a.m., just as the British were leaving. Trust me when I tell you this. It's my next point. The flag was not raised in victory. I know it sounds cruel, but that flag was not raised in victory. It was not raised because Armistead's wife was having a baby girl, but she was. And it certainly, we get a lot of stories here, it certainly was not because they raised the flag so Francis Scott Key could see it and write the Star-Spangled Banner. Nope. Here's the reason that flag was raised. This is new stuff. I have no social life. I spend most of my time in libraries. This is hot stuff. The flag was raised at 9 o'clock that morning because Army regulations state at 9 o'clock every morning you raise the flag. You fire the morning gun. You play Yankee Doodle, which they played several times during the battle. It's the national song. Catchy tune. If you haven't heard it, go to the music store and get one. And it's at that moment that Key, lawyer from Georgetown, Maryland, who had been sent out by the British, who had been sent out to obtain the release of a friend of his being held prisoner by the British. He was on a small American vessel, 3 miles from here, this side of the bridge. That bridge is 4 miles from here. And from that vantage point, he had watched the bombardment, and he saw the flag going up that morning. He began to write those 4 verses. What he did is not that became the national anthem. To me, that's unimportant. What's important about that moment, and we found this out, I was lucky enough to be the historian on the project at the Smithsonian for the restoration of the flag, and my job was to do the physical history of the flag. Nobody knew anything about the flag. We knew all about Key and the song, but no one ever investigated the history of the fabric of our lives. When Key wrote those 4 stanzas, for the first time, somebody, Key, put down on paper what that meant. No one had ever explained what that flag meant, what it symbolized. And what we had to do at the Smithsonian is get rid of 200 years of history wrapped around that flag and patriotism and all these big events in the past 200 years. Get rid of it all. And just focus on 1777 when the Flag Act was made by the Continental Congress until that moment when that flag was raised. Key explained to the people what that meant, and within 2 days, copies of the song was given to every soldier in the fort. Within 2 months, every newspaper in the country had published the song. It went straight to the top of the chart. We are talking Grammys here. No one had ever done that. We are also looking into research. Very rare for that flag to have been carried in the American Revolution or the War of 1812. It didn't have that meaning that we put on it today. What had meaning, and the flags that were flown in the Revolutionary War, not to say that wasn't carried, but not as much as people think. The flags that were made by the officers' wives. Don't tread on me. Flags like that. That had meaning to them. And so it won't be until 1843 that the U.S. Army officially is authorized to carry the stars and stripes into battle. And so the flag flies here 24 hours a day by special orders of the President of the United States. No matter what the weather is, how severe it is, there's a flag flying here 24 hours a day. There's only 5 sites in the world where the U.S. flag flies by orders of the President. He comes here twice a year. I get a $7 entrance fee from the helicopter pilot. No favoritism here. I voted for Madison for president. Fort McHenry, the Iwo Jima Memorial, Marine Corps in Arlington Cemetery, the Washington Monument, the White House in the District of Columbia, and all U.S. ports of entry. These are the 5 presidential sites. All others are either congressional or private. Anyone may fly a flag at night as long as it's illuminated. There are no flag laws. There are flag etiquette codes which have been put into place since 1912. So if we had that big flag up today, and I did not have it up today because of the weather earlier today, it would cover the top half of that flagpole and come over the top of this building here on my left. And on a clear day and night with our lights upon it, you can see it all the way to the Chesapeake Bay. So in finishing, I ask of you all perhaps to come back next year again in September when we celebrate Defenders Day. It's the second oldest national holiday in the country. It's the anniversary of the battle. Be the 200th anniversary of the War of 1812, the Battle for Baltimore, the writing of the Star-Spangled Banner, and the British invasion of America in 1814. It's a 2-week program we're putting together. The Blue Angels will be coming back, despite that nasty word, sequester. And tar ships and the Queen of England. The Queen of England is going to send one of her 2 little dogs here. We haven't confirmed that yet. So folks, have a nice day. I hope you enjoy yourselves and keep cool. Bye.
Thank you.
And if you have any questions about the guns here, my young volunteer will be glad to answer them for you. And right now, I'm going to go over and get some ammunition for my soldiers there. We normally have 50 people here in historic uniforms. We have the largest 1812 complement in the country here, plus fife and drum corps. And because of the bicentennial year, we're kind of like a traveling 1812 circus. We're going up and down the bay, giving programs at other cities. And but we're normally here every Saturday and Sunday. But unfortunately, the Battle of Gettysburg is being fought again.